Have you ever discovered that your own parents secretly emptied your inheritance without even telling you? Imagine logging into your trust account and seeing nearly half of it gone, used under a vague clause called joint family use, signed by your mother, not you. The shocking truth? Most shared trusts only require one signature to legally drain your funds, and often it's family who abuses that first. My name is Callen. I spent 10 years living carefully, thinking my future was secure, until I found out my share had been touched. 4 years ago. In this video, I'll show you exactly how I took back control, how I protected what was left, moved it to safety, and exposed the quiet betrayal hiding in plain sight. I even sent the $75,000 they demanded, but from my half, with documentation they couldn't twist. If you or someone you love has a trust, don't skip this. Every minute you wait could cost you your financial autonomy. Before we dive into the story, I'd love to get to know you a little better. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. That way I can send you a special shout out. Now, let's begin our story together. The candle had burned down halfway, pooling vanilla-scented wax around the base like it was trying to anchor me to something warm. Outside, Beacon Hill shimmered in that soft, golden way it does in late fall, like the city knows winter's coming and is doing its best to soften the blow. My spreadsheet glowed on the laptop screen, full of line items and tiny hopes, rent projections, retirement adjustments, a hypothetical vacation column that stayed mostly untouched. That's when the phone rang. Not a number I didn't recognize, not a robocall or a neighbor. It was them. I answered without saying hello. "We're calling to give you a chance to do the right thing, Callen." It was my mother's voice, sweet, careful, and wrapped in something that always smelled faintly of rehearsal. Marilyn Carter didn't shout, she implied. And this was her version of pressure. I didn't speak right away. I'd learned over the years that silence made her uncomfortable, and discomfort made her rush. "It's Brianna," she added, as if that explained everything. I looked down at my keyboard. "What happened?" "She got into some trouble," she said, drawing the word out like she was waiting for me to fill in the rest. "Some people are expecting to be paid back, $75,000 soon." "Who are these people?" She hesitated. "Does it matter?" "Yes," I said. "It does." "She's your sister, Callen." "Still matters." There was a pause on the other end. I could hear my father breathing. Gerald Carter had always had a presence that didn't require many words. You felt it in the gaps between them. Finally, he spoke. "This is your family. Step up." 3 words. That's all he ever needed. Short, sharp, loaded. I closed the spreadsheet. The numbers didn't care what kind of son I was. They just sat there, waiting to be rearranged. "I need more than vague pressure and a dollar amount," I said. "Callen," my mother began, her voice now lower, almost pleading. "If you can't do this, maybe we're not really a family anymore." There it was. Not a request, a consequence. She didn't yell. She didn't beg. But she knew how to make it sound like saying no was cruelty, like saying yes was the only way to stay a good person. I didn't tell her what I remembered, that when I was 18 and had just moved out for college, she mailed me an invoice for back rent on my childhood room. Meanwhile, Brianna had a new MacBook the same month, because mental balance matters. I didn't bring it up. Didn't revisit how balance always meant Brianna got cushions while I got lectures. That was the game, and I'd stopped playing it a long time ago. "Send the numbers," I said. "What? You want me to take this seriously? Put it in writing? A name, an account, something real?" Another pause. Then she said, "Fine." The line clicked. Silence filled the room again, but it was different this time. Heavier. Like something had gotten in while the door was open, and now I had to live with it. I sat there for a while. The candle flickered, casting soft shadows across the edge of my coffee table. I could still smell the cedar from the wick. Then, almost without thinking, I reached into the back of my filing cabinet. the bottom drawer, the one that stuck, and pulled out the envelope I hadn't touched in nearly a decade. It was old, yellowed at the corners. My name, written in the looping cursive I'd recognize anywhere. Grandfather Ellis. Inside, a copy of the trust. The original document he'd shown me before he died. Just once during a weekend visit when I was 19. He'd called it seed money for when I was ready to grow something of my own. I'd assumed it was symbolic. I hadn't read it since. I unfolded the pages. The paper made a dry sound like it had waited long enough. Paragraphs and legal phrasing, stipulations and signatures, all too formal for the man who used to sneak me candy before dinner and say, "Don't let the world make you smaller, kid." That man had believed in fairness. He also never trusted Marilyn with money, or with much else. I didn't know what I was looking for, not exactly, but the fact that I'd kept this all these years meant some part of me knew I'd need it. Someday. Maybe someday was now. I stepped out onto the small balcony. The Boston air had teeth, sharp and honest. The city lights blinked back at me like nothing had changed. But something had. I wasn't 18 anymore. I wasn't broke, and I wasn't going to pretend I hadn't seen this coming. I held the phone in one hand and the old trust in the other. They already took once, I whispered to no one. Let's see what's left. The candle's scent followed me through the open door, cedar, vanilla, and a trace of memory. The kind that doesn't fade, even when the lights do. And somewhere inside that silence, I knew this wasn't going to be about saving Brianna. It was going to be about finding out how much they thought I'd forgotten. They told me it was a shared account. They forgot to mention they'd emptied it. The morning light came in dull gray, brushing the hardwood floors with no real warmth. I hadn't opened the blinds fully, just enough to see Beacon Street blur past like a watercolor I didn't want to name. My coffee was cold, the same mug from yesterday, chipped along the rim. I stared at it longer than I should have. Maybe because it was the only thing in this apartment that hadn't lied to me. I refreshed the bank portal, again and again. Every tab on my browser felt like a silent witness. One for my current account, one for the trust, one for a Reddit thread I'd pulled up the night before titled, "What Happens When Your Parents Touch Your Inheritance Without Telling You?" That one had more comments than I expected. I typed out the email to Meryl Singh 3 times before I sent it. The first version was too polite, the second too vague. The third, blunt, factual, with just enough of a paper trail to make her sit up in her office in Manhattan and take it seriously. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged. Meryl never said hello. She got straight to the point. Callen. There was a $42,000 withdrawal in 2018, approved by Marilyn under Joint Use Clause. Joint Use Clause. I sat back in my chair, the wood creaking like it knew something I didn't. That clause was buried in the middle of the trust papers, something Grandpa had allowed in good faith. It meant either party could use the money for family obligations, but only with mutual agreement. That agreement was supposed to come with 2 signatures. I never signed anything. I looked over at the envelope, same one I'd kept since college. Beige, brittle, but still sealed. I knew what was inside. The original documentation of the trust. Grandpa's initials in blue ink on every page. He trusted my parents to honor it, trusted them to respect the balance. Half mine, half held until we both turned 30. Brianna had turned 30 last year. I turned 30 this March. The money should have sat untouched until then. Want to guess what the $42K was for? Meryl's second email came in while I was still staring at the envelope. Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless. I typed, Brianna? She replied, Private treatment facility, Arizona, 6 weeks, left after 2. That was the same year she dropped out of her therapist training program and came back home saying the curriculum was too spiritually shallow. I remember Marilyn's Facebook post back then, something about Brianna choosing rest over routine. I guess I paid for the rest. I stared at the digits again. $42,000 gone. Quietly, casually. Labeled as if we'd had a family board meeting and agreed. Except there was no meeting, no memo, just my half, erased. The worst part wasn't the shock. It was that I wasn't shocked at all. I closed the tabs one by one. The bank page, the thread, even my budgeting spreadsheet. What was the point? The numbers had already lied once, or at least been rewritten without me knowing. I opened a new draft. 2. Merrill, subject, trust action. What if I moved the rest into my personal holdings? Her reply came in 20 seconds flat. Do it. You're covered. Your name's on the trust and you're over 30. They've spent their share. Move yours before they invent a new reason to claim it. I stared at her words. They weren't just advice. They were clearance. I reached for the drawer beside me, pulled out the envelope. It felt heavier than I remembered. The seal cracked with a quiet sound, like an old promise finally exhaling. I unfolded the papers slowly, lining each page across my desk like a chessboard. Grandpa's signature, the dates, the stipulations, my name, Callen Brooks Carter, typed neatly beside the phrase, 50% ownership, unencumbered after March 2022. Today was November 19, 2022. I ran my finger across the clause Merrill had flagged. Joint use, mutual agreement. No mutual, just usage. I opened a new tab and initiated the transfer. It asked for routing details. I had them memorized. A decade of budgeting makes you sharp, cold, unsentimental. The money moved fast. So did my breath. When the confirmation email hit my inbox, I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just stared at the screen, hands still on the keys. They'd already taken once, but they wouldn't again. Not without a knock at the door and a warrant to match. Outside, the wind pressed against the windows, just enough to remind me that the world hadn't stopped turning. I looked at the papers again, still stretched across my desk like a map I finally understood. It wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming the coordinates. And I had just made my first move. I didn't move from my chair. My legs felt rooted, heavy with a decade's worth of swallowed truths. The printer on the shelf, rarely used, blinked to life. I hit print. The trust documentation, the withdrawal summary Merrill attached, the email threads. If this was going to be a game, I needed pieces on the board. Merrill called. "Don't wait for them to call you again," she said. "They're not asking anymore, Callen. They're circling. You don't owe them grace for what they did behind your back." Her voice had that familiar edge, just enough steel to remind me this wasn't a favor. This was cleanup. I pressed the phone between my ear and shoulder, opening a folder I hadn't touched since college applications. Tucked behind old essays and rental agreements was a note from Grandpa Ellis, handwritten on a card that smelled faintly of cigar smoke and pine. "You don't have to match their noise," it said. "Just hold your line. Loud isn't always right." I laid it beside the rest. The candle from last night had burned to its base, the wax hardened in a lopsided pool. I lit a new one. Birch this time, sharper, less forgiving. This was no longer about $75,000. This was about what they believed they could do quietly, and what I was about to answer clearly. They asked for $75,000. I sent it. Just not from where they expected. The snow had started to stick overnight. By morning, it lay in quiet layers across the windowsill, soft and thick, like silence finally settling in. My kettle screamed in the background, but I didn't move. The trust portal glowed on my laptop, cursor blinking, balance visible. 75,144.67. I stared at it the way someone stares at the last card in their hand, not because it's lucky, but because it's theirs. I opened a new email. 2. Marilyn Carter. Subject: Transfer Coordination. "Hi, Mom. I've thought about our conversation. Please send the account details where the $75,000 should be wired. I'll make the payment by Friday." I didn't say, "I'm doing this out of guilt." I didn't say, "You're right." I didn't say, "I'm doing it for Brianna." Let them fill in the blanks. They always had. Marilyn replied in under 8 minutes. Thank you, sweetheart. I knew you'd come through for your sister. She's had a hard time lately. We're proud of you. Proud. Like I was the one who dropped out and blamed the weather. Like I was the one who borrowed and forgot the word repay. I copied the routing number into my notes, double-checked the name, opened the portal. Under Transfer From, I selected Callen Carter Trust, Individual Half. Under Transfer To, I entered the account they provided. I hit Submit. A green check mark bloomed across the screen. It looked like any other transaction, ordinary, quiet, but I knew better. I downloaded the confirmation as a PDF and attached it to a reply email. Subject, Payment Complete Message Body. As discussed, confirmation attached. Sent. The response came faster than I expected. See, you did the right thing. We always knew you'd understand the bigger picture. Love you. Mom. It read like something pre-written, ready to deploy when the funds cleared. 2 minutes later, a text from Brianna. Thanks, bro. I'll totally pay you back someday. Someday. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then I hit delete. No reply, no reaction, just erasure. The kettle had stopped whistling, long cooled. The apartment smelled faintly of cinnamon and old steam, leftovers from yesterday's tea. I stood for the first time in an hour, walked to the small bookshelf near the window, and pulled down the leather folder where I kept legal notes. Inside was Meryl's number, handwritten. I didn't need it, but it felt right, touching base with something that hadn't lied to me. I opened a new email. To Meryl Singh. Subject, Trust Disbursement. They asked for payment. I just made it official. Use my share. All documented. I paused before hitting send. Reread every word. Clean. Direct. Legal. Then, click. The snow was still falling, steady now, the kind that sticks to tree branches and telephone wires. I stepped onto the balcony in my socks. Let the chill bite. I wanted to feel something clean, something real. Then the phone buzzed again. Voicemail. Marilyn's voice. Less syrup now, more vinegar. Callen. What did you do? The bank says it was your share. Why would you? She trailed off. No warmth, just alarm. I leaned against the railing, the phone still in my hand, speaker still on. That's right, I said softly to no one. It always was. I stayed outside longer than I needed to. The snow layered over the porch railing like icing on a stale cake, too clean for what I felt. My fingers numbed around the phone. The wind stung, but not enough. Not yet. I remembered that afternoon in 2017 when Brianna sat curled on my couch, sobbing over a breakup with a guy I never even met. I'd made tea, set her up with tissues, and filled out the forms for her student insurance while she moaned into throw pillows. I'd even called the registrar for her. And no one asked me if I was okay. She called it love. They called it family. I called it Tuesday. Back inside, I peeled off my socks and stood on the hardwood floor until my toes burned. The silence had settled into something permanent. Even the candle had given up. Its wax collapsed in on itself. No scent remained. Meryl replied, "Smart move. You drew the line with precision. Don't answer their next call unless you want to." I didn't. I lit a fresh candle. Cypress and salt. Clean. A little bitter. Something about that felt like truth. They wanted payment. I gave them clarity. Later that night, I took out the old ledger Grandpa Ellis used to keep, the one he gave me the year I turned 20. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were notes, not financial, but personal, dates and names underlined in black ink. On one page, he'd written, "Don't let them rewrite what's been signed." I closed the book gently, then turned off the light. The glow from the street lamp outside bled through the blinds, painting lines across the ceiling like quiet reminders. They could keep their thanks. I had the receipt. "You tricked us." That's what my mother hissed, loud enough for the office to pause, standing there in her bright red wool coat like she'd stormed in from a Broadway rehearsal. I was seated, a mug of cold coffee in one hand, the other still on my mouse. Friday afternoon. End of quarter silence. My coworkers pretended to keep working, but no one clicked a thing. I looked up, met her eyes, and said nothing. She didn't ask if I was free. She didn't care that the badge she wore read, "Visitor escorted only." She'd barged past reception and stormed through the glass doors with all the grace of a grievance in heels. "I raised you better than this," she said, words tight. "You think this is how family behaves?" Behind her, I caught sight of Connor from accounts. He blinked at his screen like maybe if he didn't move, he wouldn't be seen. Smart guy. I stood slow and calm. My chair rolled gently back into the desk. "Hi, Mom," I said. "Don't hi me. You knew exactly what you were doing. Sending money like that, putting your sister in a position." A position? I raised one brow. Like not being handed more than her share of a trust I was supposed to be part of? Her nostrils flared. "You're twisting this. We thought you understood." "I do. I understand very clearly now." She stepped closer. Her coat brushed against my desk, leaving behind a faint trace of perfume, something floral, expensive, and layered with guilt. "I told you she wasn't doing well, that she needed help, that this was serious. And I paid. From my half," I said, steady. "That wasn't yours to decide. It was exactly mine to decide." Someone near the windows coughed awkwardly. I didn't look around. "You weaponized the system," she said, voice sharper now. "You used legal jargon to make a point." I held up my mug. "No point, just boundaries." She scoffed. "You always were the cold one. And you always made warmth a reward I had to earn." That stopped her for half a second. Just enough time for security to appear, Robert and his trainee. Not rushing, not aggressive, just there. "Ma'am, we're going to ask you to leave," Robert said. Marilyn turned toward them, exasperated. "I'm his mother." "I understand," he replied, tone neutral, "but you're disrupting a workplace and you're not on the approved visitor list." "I just needed to talk to my son." "You're talking," I said. "You just don't like the answers." She spun back to me. "You humiliated your family." I stopped hiding the truth. That's different. Her lips trembled, just for a second, just enough to notice. Then she clutched the edges of her coat like armor and walked toward the door. Security followed, no need to touch her. She walked fast now, like the cold outside might burn less than the eyes inside. When the doors closed behind them, the office was still quiet. Nobody spoke, but a few people glanced my way, then quickly back to their screens. I sat down again, took a sip from the mug. Lukewarm, bitter. The company's logo faced me, slightly faded from the dishwasher, but still legible. A triangle of stability, they called it. Finance, logic, restraint. I turned back to my screen. A new message from Meryl. Subject, cease and desist. Round 1 body. Let's shut this down, sending the first round today. I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow breath. For the first time in weeks, my pulse didn't feel like static. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. Then I clicked back into the trust portal, not to move money, just to read, to remember. In 2015, when I skipped my own college graduation because I couldn't get the day off work, Marilyn had called to tell me Brianna was checking into a spa in Vermont. "It's for her stress," she said. "College has been hard on her." College had been hard on me, too. I just didn't get spa days. That memory passed through me like a tide I no longer had to fight. I pulled open the bottom drawer of my desk and took out the leather notebook I'd started keeping since this whole mess began. I flipped past pages of receipts, call logs, notes from Meryl. I wrote one line, "Standing still is sometimes louder than shouting." Then I closed it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't victorious. I was done. For now. Outside, Boston kept being Boston. Snow in gutters, light reflected in car windows, the hum of people pretending to mind their own business. And me, at my desk, sipping what was left of the truth. They could make noise. I'd made my move, and I wasn't done yet. That night, I didn't go home right away. I walked the long way around Beacon Hill, boots crunching over fresh snow. Christmas lights blinked in windows, wreaths on brownstone doors. People inside looked warm, unbothered. For a moment, I stood outside a bakery still open late, smelled cinnamon, yeast, and sugar rising. I thought of the years I kept waiting to be invited into warmth like that, but something shifted today. Not because I shouted. I didn't have to. Truth has a way of settling into the air, just like snowfall. Quiet, certain. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the old note Grandpa Ellis once tucked into a birthday card. A single sentence scrawled in blue ink. When someone tries to take from you, son, give them silence. Then take back what's yours. I folded it again, tighter this time, and kept walking. They used to text me every week, group messages, one-liners, questions wrapped in guilt. Are you coming Sunday? Or did you forget Mom's birthday? Always something waiting, always noise. Now, my phone sat untouched on the windowsill, screen dim, quiet as snowfall. And to my surprise, I didn't miss the noise. January came soft that year. Boston wore its usual grays, but the light had changed, warmer somehow. Or maybe I had. In the stillness of my apartment, I began to notice the way shadows moved across my bookshelves at noon, the faint hum of the old radiator, the crackle of melting snow on the fire escape. The cease and desist letters had been sent by the first week of the new year. Meryl was precise like that. 2 to the parents, 1 to Brianna, she'd said over the phone. No room for misinterpretation. There wasn't. The letters were clear, legal, and final. And then, nothing. No replies, no angry voicemails, no dramatic texts, just silence. At first, I checked my phone compulsively, as if expecting a storm that never came. And then, slowly, I stopped checking. That's when the doubt crept in. I found myself pacing between rooms some evenings, unsure if I'd gone too far. Was it cruel? Cold? Had I crossed some invisible line from justice to vengeance? I replayed every call, every word. I stood by my choices. And yet, one night as the streetlights outside blinked against a slushy sky, my phone rang. It was Aunt Geneva. "Hey, sweet boy," she said, warm as always. "How's Boston treating you?" "It's quiet." "Good kind or bad kind?" I hesitated. "Depends on the day." She didn't rush me. Geneva never rushed anything. After a long pause, I asked the question that had been clawing at me. Was I too harsh? "You didn't burn the bridge, Callen," she said gently. "You just stopped holding it up all by yourself." The words landed in my chest like a hand on my shoulder, not heavy, just steady. We talked for a while. About the snow, her homemade soup, a squirrel that kept stealing from her bird feeder. I didn't say much, but I didn't have to. She filled the space without pressing into it. After we hung up, I walked over to the old chest where I kept photos. I hadn't opened it in months, stacks of prints, envelopes from pharmacy kiosks, and old holiday cards spilled into my lap. There were birthdays I didn't remember, vacations I hadn't wanted to go on, and too many pictures where my smile looked borrowed. I started sorting them. I deleted most of them off my phone that same night. But one I kept. A picture of Grandpa Ellis and me sitting on the porch in New Hampshire. I must have been 7 or 8. He had his hand on my shoulder and I was holding a book about dinosaurs. We both looked like we belonged exactly where we were. That one stayed. A week later, an envelope arrived. No return address, just my name. The handwriting was familiar. Sharp, slanted, controlled. Inside, one line, ink slightly smeared. "You'll regret this one day." It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a name. I folded the paper once, crisp and careful, and slid it into the drawer with the rest of the trust documents. It didn't shake me. Not anymore. Some bridges are made of wood and time. Some are only made of obligation. That weekend, I joined a local hiking group I'd found online. No one knew me. No one asked about my family. They talked about trail gear, weather, and lunch spots. and when we crossed a small wooden bridge in the blue hills, I paused at the center, breath visible, shoulders loose. I thought of the report card I taped to the fridge at 10, all A's. Brianna had chickenpox, so no one noticed. I'd pulled it down a week later, quietly, and used it as scratch paper for math problems. I hadn't thought about it in years, but that bridge and that breath brought it back. That week, I found myself waking up before my alarm. The quiet wasn't unsettling anymore. It felt earned. In place of texts demanding explanations or family drama laced as concern, I began writing in a notebook. Just thoughts, memories, nothing polished. One page at a time. I remembered the nights I'd cover for Brianna's missed classes. I'd answer Mom's questions. "Where's your sister?" as if I were her spokesperson. I remembered Thanksgiving 2015, when Brianna threw a wine glass across the room and stormed out. Everyone pretended it hadn't happened. I drove 4 hours back to campus that night and never said a word. We were a family of silence, but it was the kind that kept things buried. Now, I was finally choosing my own kind of quiet. On one walk, the trail curved beside a frozen creek. The path was uneven, half mud, half ice. A woman beside me stumbled slightly and laughed it off. "First hike of the year," she said. "Me too," I replied. It wasn't much, but it was honest, and maybe that was the beginning of something, because healing doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it's just a steady breath on a bridge, a cleared photo album, or the decision to stop answering to ghosts. And if that silence ever breaks again, I'll know how to listen better. To myself first. They say people don't change, they just become more of who they are. I don't know if that's true, but I do know this. I'm not the man they warned me not to become. I'm the man they never got to know. Spring in Boston has a way of softening things. The public garden was starting to bloom, daffodils poking through thawed soil, ducks gathering near the footbridge. My new apartment overlooked it all. Smaller, brighter. No lingering smells of old candles, no echo in the hallway when I shut the door. Ro was sitting on the couch, cross-legged, reading. They didn't ask what I was working on or why I paused for so long at the kitchen counter. They just looked up and smiled when I handed them tea, mint with a bit of honey, Geneva's suggestion. She had visited the week before, bringing a woven basket of herbs and cookies that crumbled with the gentlest touch. We talked about soil acidity and which plants grow best in indirect light. We never mentioned Marilyn or Brianna. It was the easiest 2 hours I'd had with family in years. Sometimes I'd get updates, unasked for but inevitable. A cousin texted, "Brianna's car got repoed LOL." I stared at the screen for a moment, then tapped delete. There was nothing left in me that needed to react. Instead, I'd built new routines. I hiked twice a week. I journaled. I watered plants and actually read the little tags that came with them. I even learned to cook without overthinking it. Ro loved my lemon rosemary chicken, though I'd never admit how many trial runs it took. Late one evening, I logged into the trust portal one final time. The balance glared back, $486. I transferred it to my personal account, then sent it back. Attached note, return completed, no balance remaining. I logged out. There was no ceremony, no dramatic music swelling in the background, just me, a desk lamp, and the steady hum of a life I no longer needed to defend. I uploaded my last journal entry the next morning, not to any blog or cloud, just to a folder named Kept Promises. They wanted me to pay. I did, and now I sleep like I never owed anyone. As I stepped outside, the sun caught the Charles River just right. Silver on the surface, soft ripples pushing outward. I didn't take my phone off Do Not Disturb. I didn't put in headphones. I walked with no destination, no ghost on my back. That was the version of me they never got to know, and I think he was always here, waiting for the silence to mean something better. Maybe it always did. A week after the final transfer, I got a letter. Not from my family, not from Merrill, just the bank. A printed notice that the trust account was officially closed. It felt clinical, final. like a hospital discharge after a long recovery. I stared at the envelope longer than I should have. There was nothing in it I didn't already know, but I tucked it into the drawer anyway. Not the one labeled trust. That was gone. Just done. That night, I left the balcony door open. A breeze rolled through, cool but not sharp. The plants swayed gently. Ro was already asleep, curled against a stack of pillows. I sat at the edge of the bed, journal in hand, and wrote nothing. Just sat. Sometimes stillness says enough. I thought about Grandpa then, how he used to whistle while oiling his tools, hands steady even when the world wasn't. He once told me, "Being needed isn't the same as being loved, Cal." I'd nodded like I understood, but I didn't. Not then. I do now. I used to think family meant loyalty. Now I think it means consent. The right to step back when love starts looking like obligation. The freedom to say no, even when it shakes the room. And I've shaken enough rooms to know I'm not going back in. Sunday morning, Ro and I walked the length of the esplanade. No phones, just birdsong, occasional laughter from joggers, and the rhythm of our steps. There was a peace in the in-between, between who I was and who I could be, between sound and silence. They asked me to pay, and I did. But I also stopped paying attention to people who only called when they needed something. The man I am now doesn't wait for apologies. He doesn't beg for seats at tables he helped build. He sets his own table, lights his own candles. And if no one shows up, he eats well anyway. Because the version of me they never got to know, he knows his own worth. And that's more than enough. Later that evening, I found an old photo tucked inside a book I hadn't opened in years. It was me, age 12, holding a Pinewood Derby car I'd carved with Grandpa. My name was scribbled on the back in his handwriting. I didn't cry, I just smiled and placed it on the bookshelf facing outward. You don't have to erase the past to stop living in it. You just have to stop letting it name you. And from now on, I write my own name. I used to think silence meant loneliness. Now I know it can mean peace. Letting go didn't make me weaker. It gave me space to breathe. Sometimes the people we love the most teach us the hardest lessons. Family isn't just about who raised you, it's about who respects you. And choosing your own peace doesn't make you ungrateful. It means you finally understand your worth. If this story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe you've carried a weight like this too. You're not alone, and it's never too late to set it down. And if this story touched your heart, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more stories about resilience and hope. Thanks for watching.